service. So we handle the patching of the hardware, the patching of the operating system, and the database engine. We help you schedule maintenance windows, those kind of things, but we're in charge of that. So it's a managed service, right? If you go serverless, which, I mean, Dan's can mention that, right? But serverless, you have very little to worry about because you're abstracting out to just a top layer of API calls or maybe things like that, right? So it's the more you rely on AWS to deliver those services for you, the less you might need to be worrying about in terms of security itself. But you're still always going to know about your data. You own your data, always own your data. You need to understand who should have access to it, how you want to control that, etc., including whatever industry requirements you might have or geography requirements or segment like financial and health and stuff. Okay. Some of data residency. So DICT Circular 010, updated June 2020. This basically describes the resident requirements for data in the Philippines. Now, notice here, everything here says government data. There's no data resident requirements for private data. So unless you're dealing with an LGU or the actual Philippines government themselves, you don't have any data residency requirements. There's none. Okay? If you are doing highly sensitive government data, you cannot be in a cloud. Only private cloud, only. No public clouds at all. If you are the next 3 down, you can be in public clouds, but you encrypt or not encrypt depending on what level you're at. So if you don't do government data, it doesn't apply to you, okay? There's no requirements at all for private data about residency. Does anybody here work with LGUs or government? No? Well, if you do, keep in mind about this, okay? And this is, so DICT is very open. They're working on, there's a new push now, administration to go cloud friendly or more digitalization of the infrastructure and the services that the government's providing. It's going to drive more push to the cloud, right? So we're going to see this change, but I don't ever think this will change. I think you're always going to have the highly sensitive data always required in country. So think about how you treat your data, right? So you have a data lifecycle, you have your data sources, and now you might have how you combine them. We built our foundational data construct here is called a data lake, right? So if you build a data lake, the idea is you put everything into it. All your sources feed into your data lake. Your data lake becomes your source of truth. You have a transient zone where things are coming in. You might have some data integrity and cleansing and those things going on there. And then you have a raw zone, which is basically your unadulterated, unmodified data as best you can, as you need for requirements. And then you will work on your data in different zones depending on what you're doing. So you break out your data into different categories in your data lake depending on any type of requirements, regulations, and access control, okay? How you manage your PII. This is a good framework for how you can break things out and then build your access policies, your data governance policies around your data to apply to this, okay? Maybe a sandbox zone has scrub data for devs to play with, to do their code and such, and maybe you're gonna have a trusted zone for certain kind of governance requirements, right? You know, how you manage those things. So this is an example how you do this. But if you are doing, if you do have a data, if you do think, or if you are a partner or a software developer who's working with a customer, and the customer insists of data residency, which they can do, we have some options for you. So we have a service called Outpost Rack. Anybody heard Outpost Rack before? One of you, okay? Outpost Rack is literally a rack of AWS services. You can lease it, it's a 3-year lease. It'll be delivered in country, installed into your data center. You cross-connect it into your own data center, and it's managed out of your region, usually Singapore in this case. Okay, so it's AWS, literally AWS infrastructure, in your data center, managed by AWS. So you don't touch it, it just sits in your data center, and it has a cross-connect into your data center. So if you have latency-sensitive applications, or you think you have data resident requirements, you can use this. To be totally transparent, this is not inexpensive, okay? But it's viable for some customers who are really looking at this right now. We also have what's called local zones. So we announced this in a year ago, December 2021, I think, where we're going to be bringing in basically, so if you look at Singapore, Singapore has 3 AZs, availability zones, which is separate stacks of infrastructure that are independent of each other. They give you the ability to have resiliency in a region, right? So you can run your services in any one of those. And a region like Singapore has basically all of our services available. A local zone is more or less equivalent to be as one AZ, but a subset of services. Basically, mostly core services. Sometimes more than that, but usually you're going to have your compute, your storage, your database at a minimum. You might have more services, but may have containers, might have EMR, those kind of things. But local zone is really geared towards local requirements around data and local requirements around latency, okay? So you have some more options, again, potentially to keep your data in country if that becomes a challenge for your organization. Okay, so we announced Manila. You can see here, we already have a bunch. We announced some new ones, and hopefully the Manila will be available sometime, hopefully this year. We don't know for sure. Okay, use cases I mentioned, latency-based. If you have a highly sensitive application, we have some financial customers who are looking at Outpost and local zone because the latency requirements they have that are very difficult to meet, even with a low latency of going to Singapore. Singapore is only 35, 40 milliseconds round trip from here. Not too bad. But for them, that's way too long. Okay, they need like less than 10 milliseconds. Okay? And location-based. Just a point in fact, it's not a fact, but we opened up a region in Jakarta recently. A year ago, I guess it was. Was it this year? Was it? I forget when it was. Maybe December last year? Jakarta? I forgot how long. It's been a while. It's a blur. Anyway, part of the driver for Jakarta was government requirements around data residency. So we will do things like build regions when we actually absolutely have to and the customer needs it and those kind of things. But it's a long process and it takes a long time. Will there be a region here in the Philippines? I don't know. We have local zone. That might be all we get. We don't know. But let me tell you one thing on the side. So I do a lot of talks to businesses around modernization, moving to clouds, and so and so. And a lot of customers love their on-premise data centers. And I keep asking them, why would you have a data center in the Philippines? Why would you do that? Well, they want to be close to it. Well, Philippines is number 2 in the world for disaster risk. Okay? We used to be number 3, but now we're number 2. So we are the 2nd highest risk country in this world for disaster. Typhoons. I mean, Odette came through Cebu, Central Visayas, and Siargao a year ago, December, right? A lot of companies were out or offline for 7 days or more. And it wasn't because of flooding. The data centers were fine. They had no fuel. Most of the data center providers don't carry that much fuel on hand. And when the fuel ran out, they could not get supplies refueled. So I had a power company running SAP workloads that couldn't service their customers for 7 days. Very, very bad experience for them. They're now moving to AWS because they want to have the ability to have a more resilient infrastructure. So think about that. If you really want to do it right in this country, you're going to need to have a geographically separate set of infrastructure. Cebu, maybe. Pampanga, maybe. Manila, maybe not. Depends, right? I have customers who have 3 data centers in like 2 kilometers apart. And like that, there's no DR there. There's no DR. At least from the typhoon type perspective, the flooding, those kind of things. Anyway, so just the point in time. I ask customers, why do you want to be in this country? Well, if you do need to be, we have some ways to address that, okay? So just think about that as well. In local zones, may have, again, some services, not everything. We don't know exactly until they start filling it out and deciding what they're going to do. But in general, most of the core services you're going to have locally. Okay, let's talk about PII management real quick. So this is an important way of how you handle your data, right? How you handle PII. And so we have customers, often before you used to have a custodian database. Maybe you were the custodian database and you shared your data. And you have PII. And you would usually tokenize things, right? I remember for many years ago, before LifeLock, we built a tokenizer for my companies, and it was very painful to build, and we actually had to do two-way reversible tokenization because in the US, a lot of the credit card numbers, your PAN, your credit card number, is actually your account number. At least it was back in 2010 and 11. So your identifier for a person was also their credit card number. It was the same thing. It's changed a lot now, but back then, so we had to have reversible tokenization, and that's really hard to do, right? The whole point is to have tokenization so you can't go back and get the credit card information, so you can be PCI compliant, right? So I made challenges for that, but now they're getting better about that, and they're not really using so much. You don't see it so common anymore of your credit card number for your credit card account being your actual account identifier, right? So hopefully we're better than that. But that's something we learned over time. But often you tokenize. But now we're saying something called sentence matching, where you do hashes and you split the data up and you anonymize it. So you allow third parties to access your data as they need to, but they have no ability to be put together in a way to identify one individual, right? They can get trends, they can get generalizations, they can do, for analysts and stuff, they want to look at large scale, but you anonymize the data, and hashing is a good way of doing that. One-way hashing. So you slice your data up, you chop it up, you hash it out, then you give it access to your third-party consumers and so who want to do that, and then they can use it without any risk of PII exposure. Let's get into data privacy really quick here. So this is your core concern in Data Privacy Act of 2012. It describes who it covers. Basically, if you exist in this country dealing with anybody who's a Filipino, you have this requirement, okay? Whether you're on premises, brick and mortar, or in the cloud, you gotta deal with privacy, okay? So this is actually very important. We have a white paper built on this. That explains how, from an AWS perspective, how we deal with this. For you to understand how we deal with our privacy requirements for you guys, our customers, to meet compliance for the Philippines. But the same idea applies for you, for your own customers, right? So we're just one level down, but it's the same idea. We have white paper. You can take if you want to download it, you can. Will we give them the slides afterwards or not? Do we do that? Okay. You'll have the slides. You'll get the QR code if you want to, or the link. You want to take that long link there. Obscurity, right? Security through obscurity. You can't type it in. Okay. So let's go through this real quick here. So collecting personal data. So you're only supposed to collect data that has been declared and specific. You're going to use it. Okay. So you don't collect everything, you collect what you specifically say you're going to collect for legitimate purposes. Okay, now, again, these aren't defined. I'm not a lawyer, so you can find one attorney saying you got to do X, Y, Z, another one saying something different, okay? I'm just saying this is what we understand it to be, but what does it legitimate mean? Depends how you want to argue legitimate, right? I don't know. So this is something to be aware of. Just understand how these are written and understand what it means for you. So the customer determines and controls when, how, and why it collects personal data from its data subjects, right? And they decide whether to include personal data in its customer content. This is the AWS perspective. So we're talking about you guys as our customers, right? So you guys define that. We don't actually work with your data. We don't access to your data. But you define all that. We don't collect any personal data whose personal data is included in the content of customer stores or processes of AWS services. So when you use AWS service, S3, EBS, any type of service you subscribe to, we don't collect that data. We don't access it. Okay, and we explicitly say that. This is because we're not allowed to do that. Okay, and we don't do it anyway. Just not a good practice. We don't do it. So we don't ever move your data. If you put your data in Singapore, it never leaves Singapore unless you move it. Okay, so it's always up to you. We don't have any visibility to customer data. Now, to be transparent, we do have metadata around certain things, high-level abstracted anonymous data around behaviors, right? How many services are being used in a region, how many segments of a customer, those kind of things, right? But no customer-specific information, because you as a company are also PII, right? It's the same thing, right? You just, entity of a company versus a person, it's still the same thing. We treat it the same way. This makes our ability to have compliance easy because we don't see a customer any different than an actual individual, okay? Okay, so let's talk about this, processing personal data. So the law is, the law is, You only process data in the manner and to the extent necessary that's compatible with the declared specified purpose. So you state what your purpose is for collecting it is, you only can process it for that purpose. Okay? So you can't go and say, I'm collecting this for this reason, but I go away and do something else with it. You're not supposed to do that. Okay? Now, companies do all the time, but if you get caught, you could have penalties in this country. Okay? AWS, again, customer always controls. You control why you collected data, what it's used for, and by who. We don't get involved in that. It's up to you and your customers. But as our customer, we only use customer content provided under services by the customer, and do not use any customer content for other purposes except for as legally required. Okay? So if there's a law, like for example, if you're working on the US and you get a subpoena for data, AWS has to reveal information. That we can. The easy thing is we don't have a lot of information to reveal, but there are things like when you subscribe to an account, you have information about your company and those kind of things, financial information there that can be revealed in the event of a federal or police subpoena type of environment. Okay, so we have to do that. But your data, we don't access the data. And I'll tell you another thing too. If you want to make sure we can't receive data, encrypt your data. If you be more paranoid, use your own keys. Okay, I mean. Do that, there's no way. But my point is we don't have access to your data. I'm just saying if you want to be super paranoid, you can encrypt. Okay, retention and deletion. Data, the law in the Philippines, don't keep it longer than you need to. Well, it's kind of hard to say, it's up to us. The law is very vague, right? You can have reason to have data for 10 years for statistical or analysis, whatever. I want to go back and look at my 10 years of my users' profiles if I have some, I come up with some reason. So it's easy to get around this, but really you should not be keeping your data very long. Plus you don't want to. I mean, unless you have a really business reason to do so, you're putting yourself at risk, right? And you're also going to pay for that data. I mean, happy you want to put more data on S3, that's great, but what's the value are you getting from it? Okay? So you have a lot of dimensions to your data, but why you keep it as long as you do. But when you get rid of it, GDPR people, for example, do it in a proper way. Okay? So if anybody here has a public-facing website where you register, there are a lot of foreign nationals in this country, and including a lot of EU members. I promise you, Lazada and Shopee have GDPR requirements, because I know they have EU members using those services. If you are in that same situation, you have any members of your country who are from the EU, you better have the ability to let them delete their own data. You better, because the fines are excessive in the EU, and they will fine you and fine you out of business basically. So the great strategy for this is find the toughest privacy and data requirements you need to deal with, and make it your standard across your organization, right? Unless you have a compelling reason not to, you make things consistent. There's less chance for things to go wrong, right? If you have 10 different policies on 10 different kinds of data, depending on what country someone's in, who they are, and so, the opportunity to mishandle the data really increases, okay? So think about that. So simplify things as much as you can. Now, public data, separate out there, tag it separately, and then know about your internally sensitive PII, those kind of things. Classify your data. Have those exercises. Anyway, don't keep as long as necessary. Again, you decide how long you want to keep the data of your customers. We support AWS services are GDPR compliant. Okay, so you can delete your data. We give the ability to do so. Security measures. This is actually pretty technical here in terms of how they put it in the law, but you need to have security measures to maintain the availability, integrity, and confidentiality of personal data. So you got to protect the data. That's all it's saying. Make sure the right controls in place. You manage access. You want to protect against accidental loss or destruction, unlawful access, fraudulent misuse, unlawful destruction, alteration, and contamination. So the law here does get pretty specific. It's also very broad. Okay? So in the Philippines, you need to protect the data you're doing that's considered personal data. Whatever is possibly determined as PII, you need to protect it. So put the right controls in place, build the right policies around that. What customers do, again, up to you. We're here to help you understand that, but what you actually do is really up to you. And we can help you find ways, and we have then third parties that can help you do it as well. But there's ways, solutions out there that can help you manage data governance and make sure you are in compliance. We are responsible for managing security underlying cloud environment. So again, that's shared responsibility model. We do the infrastructure, underlying environment. We control that. We're audited on that. We meet those compliance requirements and everything. So that part is off your worry. You don't need to worry about that. Okay, so let's get into FSI segment, financial services industry, digital banking. The BSP, Circle 808, is your approval to get a workload on, actually any workload, but applies also to cloud. Okay, and this is an older circular, 2013. They have a revision coming out. We don't know when, and I don't have any information to share on it. I've not seen it, but it's likely to be a lot more cloud friendly than before. And before it wasn't that bad. I mean, BSP has been very friendly to cloud as it is. But we have Union Bank. They're top 5 bank in the Philippines, digital bank. They're on AWS. We have case study for them out here. You can go research this on AWS. You can go get the case study, research it all. They're a bank. They got approval from BSP to run their core banking systems on AWS in Singapore, not in country. Okay? So if anybody says, I'm a bank, I need to have my data in country, you can say, what about Union Bank? Okay? So just, we have references that can show you that there's perception out there, and we're trying to help you understand that perception so you can make better decisions for yourself and for your customers. Okay? We have architectures as well. We can give you reference architectures around how to do things like using landing zones, control tower. Anybody here ever heard the term landing zone? No? Control tower? A few of you? Okay. So there's a little history here. Sorry, Dams, I'm going a little. It's okay, I have time? Okay. So landing zone was a construct that SAs like me and Dams many years ago built for customers. So a long time ago, AWS only had one account ID per customer, but we had multiple VPCs, right? So you'd have a VPC for dev, best practice was VPC for dev, VPC for staging, and one for production, one for something else. Up to 5 VPCs by default. But then we came out with having customers wanting more than one account. So we have multiple accounts. Well, it gets messy because you want to have access here and there and everything else. So you want to manage all that. And if you create an account a year later, that account creation, the likely parameters you use to define your networks and your VPC are different than they were a year ago. So SAs came up with the idea, let's build a consistent framework for building multi-account strategies. So landing zone became a way of having this set of accounts you'll use always, a master account. You have maybe a security account, a logging account, a shared service account, production, dev, so on and so, for your workloads. But they're all individual accounts. And they were managed under AWS organizations. So organizations is a service that acts kind of like AD, but for AWS accounts. So you have the ability to have them all linked under a master account, that then you can push down policies called SCPs, and these policies can control kind of how accounts can behave on sub-accounts. But Control Tower is a modern approach to it as a service. So the landing zone was SA engaged or ProServe engaged or partner engaged. It was kind of expensive and time consuming. So we turned into a service called Control Tower. So you can launch a control tower, a landing zone in your account using Control Tower. It'll create an organization for you and a bunch of standard accounts. And like for example, login account is a one-way door. You can go into it, you can't pull out of it. It's a write-only account for all the other accounts to go into. So, because what do bad actors do? They get into an account, they wipe out all the CloudTrail logs, right? Well, if you send them somewhere else, in addition to having locally in that one account, we send them to another account, they're still there. You can go back forensically and look at history and say, oh, this is what happened, right? So there's mechanisms in place to give you a best practice on how to manage multi-account strategy, okay? So it's a great service. And talk to your SAs before you actually do it, okay? I mean, if you're really savvy on AWS, by all means. But if you need any guidance, we are here to help you with that. It does we do what's called guardrails and not really hard rules. We kind of guide you on how to do things. But you can define your network policies or security policies, those kind of things, how you want to do that. But we can guide you in that process. But don't turn on your production right now, because that probably wouldn't be a good thing. Anyway, this is an example of a digital bank architecture using landing zone, okay, or a control tower. And here's a reference architecture as well. So we have these things in different segments. You can always go to solutions at Amazon, AWS.com, I think it is, I forget, or Amazon, AWS, Amazon.com/solution. We have a solutions index. You can search for all different segments and get reference architectures. Okay, that's a starting point. And then adapt them to what you need for your organization. And these reference architectures will follow best practices that we've already learned about. Okay, well architected and security and all those things as well. Okay, that's my talk. So I have references here as well. I don't have anything on BIR because BIR is a whole different can of worms. If you have a BIR, you can put SAP and AWS, no problem, they allow that. But there's certain things that don't allow, like the receipt generation systems need to be local unless you have certain things identified, and every different region that interprets those rules differently. So it's kind of a muddy, murky water right now. So we don't really talk about BIR too much. Anyway, that's it. So thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be here later, but I'll give the floor up to Dan and our partner here. Thank you.
We wanted to solve that for our customers. So when you install CrowdStrike, it only consumes about 1% of CPU, about 70 to 100 megs of memory, and when you install it, it doesn't require a reboot. Now, if you have any experience in installing antivirus solutions, corporate-wide, organization-wide, this is heaven. I promise you, based from experience, this is heaven. Alright, so we do have that one sensor. It supports any workloads. You can install it on workstations, you can install it on servers, you can install it on-premise, you can install it on your workloads in the cloud. I emphasize AWS there, but we do support other clouds as well. We even support containers. So if you're running containers in AWS or in Red Hat, in AWS, or even on-premise, we can also install the sensor there. We also have special sensor or special module for identities. Because again, compromised credentials are quite the trend in breaches today. If you've heard of the Cisco hack, the Uber hack recently, that one was pure credentials. They didn't use any malware, they didn't use any phishing, they didn't use any social engineering. It's just that they have the stolen credentials. What are you going to do if someone logs in using valid credentials? Your AD is not going to stop that. So this is where identity protection comes in. I have a whole presentation on that. It's actually quite interesting. So what makes the Falcon sensor unique? So firstly, we wanted to stay away from the traditional approach to security, to endpoint security, which is signature-based. So signature-based meaning if a file lands on the server, the AV would usually check the hash. If the hash is part of the bad list, the naughty list, it's going to block that, basically. It's going to quarantine the file, and it's not going to run anymore. That's the old way. That's the traditional way. So CrowdStrike didn't want that because, number one, it's reactive, right? What if it's a new file? What if it's a new malware and we don't know the hash? Then the AV will not block it, right? So in CrowdStrike, we didn't want that. So we developed our own machine learning engine where it's capable to stop both known and unknown threats purely based on behavior, without relying on reactive signatures and indicators of compromise. We also developed IOAs, which is indicators of attack. Again, this is behavior-based, proactive, even though we don't know the hash, as long as the file or the process behaves suspiciously or maliciously, we will terminate that or quarantine the file. So what does an IOA look like? So for example, the Falcon sensor is installed on the machine. It sees a process execute. After that, the process proceeds to enumerate the file system, and then it deletes the backups and calls an encryption routine. Anyone knows what this behavior is?
Ransomware.
Yes, ransomware. This is ransomware. Whether that's WannaCry, whether that's... I already forgot all the other ransomware. Whatever type of ransomware, okay? It behaves the same way. So instead of focusing on the hash, which can change like arbitrarily, we focus on the behavior. So once we see this happen on the machine, we will be able to detect it because of indicators of attack and machine learning. So this is how CrowdStrike is able to prevent known and unknown threats. It also provides complete visibility. It collects over 400 different event types. So once you install the Falcon sensor, anything that happens on your laptop, on your server, on your container, will be logged as an event. A process starts, you open an app, you create a file, you delete a file, you modify the registry key, whatever happens, it will generate an event, and it will be streamed back to the CrowdStrike cloud. Think of it as CCTV for your workloads, right? Something happens, I'll just rewind or review the CCTV footage. It's the same thing. We collect the telemetry and you can view it on a timeline so that you can analyze and investigate whatever happened on that particular workload. So that's also part of the Falcon sensor. And of course, I mentioned this earlier, we also support all the features that I mentioned above, like the machine learning, IOA, visibility. Those are all present, even when we install the Falcon sensor on containers and cloud workloads. So it gives you that same visibility, it gives you that same protection, but at the same time, it also has specific dashboards for cloud. So for AWS, for containers, I'm going to show you as well what that looks like later. So when it comes to cloud security, CrowdStrike approaches it in two strategies. The first one is you need to have visibility on your control plane, because not all workloads, not every workload in AWS, you can install a sensor on it, right? There's serverless functions, there's S3 buckets, you can't really install anything on that. So that's why we need to integrate AWS with our CSPM module, which is the Falcon Horizon. But personally, don't record me saying this, alright? Personally, I've been in security. This is my third cybersecurity company. All CSPMs are the same. Every one of them. It's the same. It's not really that interesting because it's basically the same features for each vendor CSPM. The thing that separates the cloud security is the container or cloud workload protection. That's the game changer. At least for me, that's how I view it. Because everyone will integrate with AWS and it will tell you, how many S3 blocks you have that are not encrypted, how many security groups you have that are permitting, access everywhere. CSPM is basically the same, but CrowdStrike makes a difference in cloud workload protection because this is where we install the sensor on your workloads, if possible, if permitted. Containers, workloads, whatever. Amazon Linux image, we can support as well. And this is where your machine learning will run, this is where the IOAs will run, and this is where we can collect the telemetry. And that's the difference of CrowdStrike. So this is the business value of the Falcon Cloud Workload Protection. Again, it supports the major cloud providers, specifically AWS. It has runtime protection, Kubernetes, and container protection, and we can even have cloud threat hunting, specific threat hunting for cloud workloads as well. So aside from supporting containers and cloud workloads, the Falcon sensor also gives you the capability to perform response and remediation remotely. So without having to connect to the server or to the workstation, you can issue commands such as terminating processes, removing files in order to fully clean up the machine that was infected or that was compromised. That's also part of the Falcon platform. And this is what the Falcon platform looks like, by the way. So it all starts with that lightweight agent that I've been talking about so much. Because that's the core of the platform. You have to install the sensor on your workstation, server, containers, cloud workloads, and everything is fed back to the CrowdStrike Security Cloud. That's the three red bars that you see in the middle. And that's where the magic happens. The threat analytics, the machine learning, etc. Everything that happens in the cloud. And this powers our modules. So endpoint security, cloud security, we even have security and IT ops modules, threat intelligence, zero trust, and coming soon, data protection. And as I mentioned earlier, the CrowdStrike Security Cloud is 100% hosted in AWS, right? Okay, so it's time for the demo. Very quick, I'll show you what the platform looks like. By the way, do let me know if you have any questions, okay? Alright, so this is... Okay, so this is the Falcon platform. This is the activities dashboard. This is the landing page once you log in. The platform itself is not slow. It's my mobile connection. It's hosted in AWS, so it's fast. It's fast. Alright, so this is where you can see all of your detections, whether it's on-prem, whether it's on the workstation, whether it's in the cloud, in AWS, or other cloud providers. You'll see it everything in a single dashboard, right? And then we have specific modules for cloud security. So I'll show you the cloud workloads discovery. So this is actually quite interesting. So this is gonna open up the dashboard, which gives you visibility into your cloud workloads monitored by the Falcon platform. So you'll see here, is it too small? Let me zoom a little bit. All right. Okay. So for example, it gives you, how many accounts you have currently integrated to the Falcon platform, how many instances you have, globally accessible instances, how many VPCs you have, regardless of how many AWS account IDs you have integrated, whether you have on-prem containers as well, or even containers and workloads in other cloud providers, it will show you everything. So as you can see here, you can see the instances by state broken down into the different cloud providers that you have. So currently we have majority running on AWS. And if I click that, everything is clickable, everything you see on the dashboard is clickable. It will show me the list of the instances I have currently running in AWS. And this is great for security teams, right? Because everything is the same, whether you're investigating a server on-prem or a laptop that was compromised, whether it's a workstation, a cloud workload, everything looks the same. Everything is available in a single dashboard. Yes, sir.
Question. Is the solution available just for a singular account or is it organization-wide?
It could be organization-wide, yes.
So if it's configured to organization-wide, we have to configure each account manually or there's a configure in CrowdStrike?
So how to deploy? So this is the toughest question usually because there are like 10 different ways on how you can install CrowdStrike on AWS. It depends on what type of containers you're using. If you're using EKS, ECS, Fargate, etc., there's actually a whole documentation about it. You can use Helm charts, you can use Operator to deploy it. And it's also a different story if you're using containers. Like you can deploy it as a daemon set, you can deploy it on the cluster node, and then it will have visibility on all the pods. So there's actually like a whole bunch of methods on how you can deploy it, whether it's per account or like organization-wide. So there's actually quite a lot. And it's really tough, because when I talk to customers, I usually just ask them, how do you usually deploy agent-based tools for your workloads in AWS? Then whatever their answer is, I'll just give them the same method, because we usually just support however you do it in the organization. Yeah. But the most popular one is Helm charts and Operator. Yeah. So this is the cloud instance drill down. You can see all of your instances running, the type, when it was launched, instance ID, the specific provider, the region, the security group, the VPC, everything is there. Yes?
Is this information augmented by CloudTrail, or it's including CloudTrail, or separate CloudTrail?
So it's including CloudTrail, yeah. But we do have customers who do not get the CSPM part because CloudTrail is under the CSPM integration. But if you just install the sensor on it, it will collect that telemetry and it will show you this, right? Yeah, so this gives another thing why this is quite interesting is because you see all the filters up top, right? Under the management, you can even filter unmanaged instances. So when we say unmanaged, these are instances in AWS that we have discovered that does not have a Falcon sensor installed. So when you install the Falcon sensor, it collects telemetry, right? Whether it communicates with another instance in AWS, that telemetry gets fed or gets streamed back to the CrowdStrike cloud. For example, it communicated with a web server, but that web server turns out doesn't have a Falcon platform, Falcon sensor. It will turn up as an unmanaged asset or unmanaged instance. And this is quite interesting because in AWS, especially if the customer is not really tightening their controls, anyone can spin up anything. And the security team will not have visibility on which ones doesn't have the sensor or which one isn't locked properly. And yeah, so this is how you can monitor those things. And you can also view containers. So we have specific dashboard for containers, and this is going to give us, how many containers are running. Okay. How many containers are running, how many pods, how many nodes over time, etc. We even have specific detections for containers as well. And we also integrate with your registry. So this is another thing that is quite important in the container world. I'm not really sure because I'm not a container person. But there is this thing like the CI/CD where everything is automated. Like if an engineer creates like an image and then it will just go to production without any scanning. So in CrowdStrike, we don't want to, of course, just monitor the running containers. We also want to see before they run, is the container image vulnerable or not? Are there any CVEs on it? And this is where we can integrate with your registry, where we can automate, we can scan the images before allowing it to run into production, right? That's also a part of the cloud workload protection. So it's not just looking at running containers, but even container images. And when we scan for vulnerabilities in that container image, we can also show you retroactive information. Like for example, we scan this particular image and it's clean, no vulnerabilities. It gets moved to production, right? We have containers running in that image. However, a day later, we found out that there's a new vulnerability and then it's currently running on my containers. How do I then know which ones are affected? We also show that to you. So anytime we detect a vulnerability, you can see how many images are impacted. And when you click on it, it will show you all the images and even the containers currently running that vulnerable image. So those are some of the things that you can see using the CrowdStrike Falcon Cloud Workload Protection. So aside from giving you, vulnerabilities and all that visibility, it also gives you detections. Like for example, I detonated I detonated an alert earlier. So what I did was, using Kali Linux, I exploited a vulnerable web server, basically running a web shell, and then downloading a malicious tool and running that malicious tool. So this is how you can see that particular detection. By the way, this is the endpoint detection. So regardless if it's container, workstation, server, it's all here, which is perfect for security analysts. So this is that particular detection. Let me just open that. So you can easily see that this is container related, because when we go back to the process tree, right, it's container, it's running container. And when I click that, It will show me the container ID, the specific command line, so we know that it's a container that has this particular detection. And then when I go and view the detection itself, so you know that it's color coded, right? So when it's this color, I think it's red or pink. It's the reason why we detected it as malicious. So firstly, the dash, we see that this was a web service that spawned an interactive web shell. So this is not normal. That's why we flagged that as malicious. And then you can see the attacker was trying to maybe perform some recon. Who am I? And then when I click on the wget, you'll see that it was attempting to download a specific malicious script. And then it proceeded to run that malicious script. Where's the command line? Oh, here. It ran that malicious script, and basically it's trying to grep like the password file. So that's basically what you can see, right? And then of course you can perform remediation. As I mentioned earlier, you can isolate the machine, network contain it so that it wouldn't be able to communicate with any of the other containers. You can even remotely connect to the host using a shell, just using the Falcon sensor installed on it. So it's encrypted, it's secure, because it's not going to, it's purely protected by the Falcon sensor itself. So you can run, different commands that are built in. You can run scripts. You can even view the running processes. If you want to terminate that malicious process that we saw, you can also kill that particular process. And this is all, wait, I'm just gonna look for that process. It's this one. It's the container D. I want to terminate that, so I just need to kill that particular PID 7984. So that when I run that again, it shouldn't show up. Right? And my session should be terminated. The session from Kali Linux. But it's not showing up. It's my connection, it's not the lab. I think it's my connection. I've been having connection problems since this afternoon. But yeah, those are the things that you can do using the Falcon platform. And again, this is true, not just for containers, it's the same feature for servers, for workstation, and it's quite important to CISOs, to security practitioners, because we all want like uniform risk. We don't want our on-prem to be riskier than cloud or vice versa. We want to use the same like compliances, the same security controls, access controls, wherever my workload is. And that's how the Falcon platform can unify everything into a single dashboard for our customers. And that's my demo. And if you're interested, you can just let me know or let Dams know, and we'll set up another demo for you. Thank you.